Hey guys, Jim here. Welcome back once again. We're going to take a look at another knife by Mr. Steve Skiff. Now, if you go back in my channel a little ways, you'll see the very first video I did on him, which was on the little cohort. And then I got myself into the Accomplice series by buying two. I actually got one at a knife show a little over a year ago and loved it. I shared that with you guys, and then Steve custom built this one for me, and still one of my top favorite knives, carried all the time, absolutely friggin' love it. But what he has done is now he's offering a version of the Accomplice in a frame lock. And I thought at first, well, that's not that big of a difference. You know, I've already got the liner lock. I love it. I've got my Mokutai on here. It's got a great satin finish on the blade. Beautiful work, the jeweling and the liners. I mean, everything is just amazing. I don't know that I really need a frame lock. But we talked it over a little bit, and he says, you know, it's just different enough that you might want to have both. It might benefit you to some degree. And you know what's funny? Now that I've got it, I honestly do see that. It's a slimmer knife, it's a little bit more lightweight, and it may be easier, or I should say even easier, for many people to carry. And I'll give you a side-by-side comparison on the two, and you can make that choice for yourself. I like having a liner lock or a bolster lock so that I have the same look of the presentation side on both sides of the knife. However, he did a really great job of making this a beautiful knife to look at from both sides. So let's start by talking about the frame and what's different here. Now, if you buy a standard Accomplice Framelock, you don't get this tri-plane setup that I have. So you have one plane here, another plane here, and another plane here, and then he's got the millwork done in the frame. The standard versions are flat, they're slab-sided, and then he has a different pattern of millwork done in there. And that was really the only thing I requested when we started talking about this build. You know, he asked for materials first, and then anything else that I had questions on. And we had talked about Damasteel in the past. I'm a huge fan of Damasteel. A lot of you guys know that. And if it's etched right, it's one of the most beautiful blade steels that you can use. And this particular pattern is called Odenheim. Absolutely gorgeous. It's a very busy pattern. There's a lot going on in there, but it's gorgeous. Now, for those unfamiliar with Damasteel, what it is it's a Damascus made of all stainless steels. So some people have an aversion to Damascus because they don't know how to properly care for their blade steels, and they can rust and corrode because they're generally high carbon steels. With Damasteel, you've got all stainless steels, and while any steel can rust and corrode, this is less likely to do so. So you don't have to be as on top of the maintenance as you would, say, something in a high carbon Damascus. So that was the first thing that we discussed, was doing Damasteel and some Timascus. And boy, he did up the Timascus, didn't he? Oh my goodness. We'll get to that in a minute. And I said, you know, I love how the frame locks look. I just want maybe a different milled pattern on mine so it stands out. It's different than everybody else's, and it's something a little bit crazy. And what he decided to do was sit down and make the very first tri-plane frame. And he did it wonderfully. Even if there was no milling for these lines here, you've got a beautiful satin finish on the top main plane, and on the side planes it's left in a really clean, very, very clean bead blasted material. Excuse me, bead blasted finish, I should say. Very clean, very crisp, looks fantastic, and it's a nice subtle contrast as you move the knife in the light, and it does so on the other side as well. They then chose to do all of the hardware in titanium and blue that so it matched the theme of all of this Timascus. So let's see, on the clip and on the two discs, and this does serve as an over travel prevention for the lock bar, by the way. So both of the discs and this beautiful huge clip is done in Aztec pattern Timascus, and then the back spacer was done in Shockwave Damascus. And I really love how that backspacer came out. And unfortunately, with everything, all the Damascus being mirror polished, it's going to play hell with my lights here, and you may not be getting the full spectrum of colors that I see with my naked eye. I'm having to put light onto it so it doesn't go dark, and it might be kind of taking away some of the effect. But in real life, it is amazing. If you're more curious about the true color representation, go back to the beginning of the video and look at the photography that I did on this, and you see just how wonderfully it pops. The action is, of course, fantastic. Very fast, very, very smooth, just like my other one. And yeah, there's a different sound to it when you've got a knife with thick titanium liners, then you have a bolster over it, then you have the scale. It definitely sounds different when it opens. Another thing that I like about the frame lock that he's done is he's given you a nice relief here, so it's easy for your thumb to access that lock without having to relieve a large area here to leave that lower than the lock. He's given you a nice big space in here, so you're not having to jam your thumb in there to find the lock and get to it. It's actually very, very easy. I should show you this as well, just like he did on his others. His maker's mark is right back there. I love when the tang of the blade comes back around and actually follows the shape and size of the frame. I think it's very, very classy. And like everything he does, there's little details of high-end finishing. That's one of the things that I appreciate about Steve, the work that he does in relation to other makers in his price category. This is a $1,200 build. This is roughly about the same. So these are not cheap knives, but you know, most guys, I should say most makers out there, would be charging more for a build like this with these materials. So already you're saving a little bit of money just in the fact that you've got the Odenheim Damasteel, all the Damascus that's in here, and the anodizing on the titanium hardware. All the polishing and etching work that goes into Damasteel always has to be factored in. It is always an expensive upgrade. This honestly would probably be about $1,500 to $1,800 from any of the hot shot flash in the pan makers that, you know, you could rattle off their names off the top of your head. But what they wouldn't be doing is offering you the level of finishing and refinement that Steve does. And that's what I really appreciate about his work. We actually ran into each other last weekend. He went to the New York Custom Knife Show at the same time that I did, and it was my first opportunity to actually meet him face to face. His son was also there, which, by the way, and I'll pause that story for a second, it's important to note that now his son has become actively involved in his father's business, and he's got a tabletop CNC that he uses to now cut out some of the parts on this knife, like the discs that you have around the pivot. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he may have cut out the blank for the clip. I might be wrong on that, but I believe he did mention that. So he's able to get his son involved with cutting out the basic parts to do all the handwork that he's doing to fit it together. Now, when we were talking to each other at the show, I was kind of walking around, and we happened to be standing in front of the aisle that had a lot of the South African knife makers. And I'm a huge fan of what the South African guys like Andre Thorburn, Andre Van Heerden, JD Van de Venner, the work that they do, because they spend so much time on little details like mirror polishing their liners that a lot of people aren't doing a nice rich finish, doing decoration inside of the frame, and making sure that every surface of the knife, whether it's visible or not from the outside, is completely finished. And I said, you know what, there's a lot of makers right here in this hall right now charging more money than you do that don't put that much work into it. Because when you break down what you're paying for in a custom knife, only some of that cost is going to be in your materials. It's like anything else, you know, and I've discussed this in the comments section on many videos where people don't understand why a custom knife costs what it does. They're like, well, they got, $150 in materials in that. Why is it $1,000? You don't buy anything for the cost of materials. If I paid for only the cost of materials on my watch, I'd be spending about $800 instead of $8,000. Eyeglasses is probably the best example. I used to work in the optical industry many, many, many moons ago. And those prescription lenses that you're spending $250 to $400 on, even you guys with the the Verilux lenses and all that kind of stuff, lenses cost about 20 cents to manufacture to their final finish. So you're paying, I don't even know what the percentage is on that, but it's probably 1,000% over the cost of the material. So it really is crazy. You have to factor in the amount of time that the knife maker puts into making their knives. Now, even though Steven is a part-time maker and he has a full-time job that pays his bills, you still have to factor in his time. To sit down and get this perfect finish on every surface takes time. There's not a single instance where there was a mistake made on this that was left behind. There is no flaw in the finish work. There's not even an errant scratch in the satin finishing. Perfect polish on all of the Timascus pieces. He took his time coloring it to get the right array of colors that he wanted to get. And the thing with Timascus is, and it's like anodizing any kind of titanium. If you blow past the colors that you're looking for, you've got to go back, you've got to sand it down, get rid of the finish that's on there, and then go back. And these are done with blow torches, so you're getting that flame treatment to get these colors out of here. So, a lot of times you won't get the color array that you're looking for. Maybe you'll get too much gold in here, or it's going to go all purple or something like that. You got to go back and refinish it. And the polishing that's been done, even in this one little section right here, polishing Damasteel to where you can't even see the pattern, pretty damn awesome. When you get down to working with Damasteel, it's not the easiest steel to work with, and the etching is a two-step process. You're not just dipping it in ferric chloride and getting the etch that you want. You're using two different acids, and you have to be very, very careful not to over etch, because you want to etch one material and not etch the other alloy that's in that steel. So to keep this beautiful, smooth finish, and there are no pits, take a really good look in here, because Damasteel, like any other Damascus, is prone to pitting during that etching process, because you're corroding the steel as you're working with it. And it is absolutely flawless. This is not a murky sea of tones of gray. It is a true black and silver, or black and white, if you will. So he's got the contrast perfect. So one of the etching processes is being done to etch into the steel to get whatever topography you're looking for. Brian Ty likes to etch really hard, and you actually can feel the elevations and the dips in the steel. Someone like Todd Begg, and like this, they tend to be much, much more smooth. But to get that to etch properly, to not etch into, look at the high layer that's in the silver. Notice that it's still beautifully polished. There's no rough spots. So it was etched to a point and stopped before that part of the steel started etching. Then he goes to the second process to get that beautiful, rich contrast. And that's the part a lot of makers fall apart on. They don't know how to get that beautiful contrast. So yeah, there's a lot of work here. You have to pay for that work. You have to pay for that labor. And the thing is with Steven, it's really, he almost sells himself short. And I've told him in the past, I said, your prices should be at least $100 to $150 more expensive than they currently are across the board, because he's spending so much time and really not releasing a knife into the wild until it's perfect. No knife is ever perfect, especially to the maker that's crafting it. But when I pick up any of his knives, I don't see flaws. I inspect them closely. I feel every little bit. And it's just, they're perfect. They're as perfect as a handmade product could really be. And to do that, unfortunately, takes a lot of time. So if you're fortunate enough to already be on Stephen's books, you are going to get an absolutely spectacular knife for the money. A knife that should rightfully cost you 10 to 20% more. Those of you that are not on his books yet, there's good news. Even though he's on a really long wait right now, it's a couple of years, he's about to make that jump into becoming a full-time knife maker. That means he will have a lot more time to dedicate to knocking names off that list. So, you know, let's just say, for example, if he decided next month to go from part-time to full-time, that, let's say he had a 2-year wait list, it would almost overnight drop to 1-year wait list, or even less, because now he's devoting so much more time to it. Now that he's brought his son into working with him, that should also reduce some of the time as well, because he could do some of the smaller work that is time-consuming and still requires a great degree of skill, and help him set up to make the knives. So, to Steve, I say congratulations. I hope you make that jump. The world needs to see more of your work. He doesn't really do a lot of shows. I'm really hoping that he does the Blade Show this year so you guys can actually fondle his knives in person. He really needs to get out there and let people see how incredible his work is, because he is on that level that you don't see often. And when you do, you know, it's makers that it's impossible to get a piece of work made by them, or the price is so prohibitive that you just can't do it. I'm not saying $1,200 for this knife isn't a lot of money. $1,200 for any knife is a lot of money. But in the world of custom knives, for the level of workmanship that he's displaying, it really is a fantastic deal. By the way, look at that Shockwave backspacer from the back. Oh, it's like candy colors. His detents are always perfect. The flipping action is fantastic. And I'm really happy to own this. Now, I mentioned to you I'd show you some of the side-by-side comparisons. You know, I didn't really think this girl had a thick booty, but yeah, it's thicker than the Snickers when you compare it to the Framelock there. Look at that. Woo! And that, for a lot of people, could be a big deciding factor. You know, it's relatively the same weight. I wanted to say this was lighter, but really side by side, if there's any difference, it's not really noticeable. But this is quite a bit slimmer, so that may be something that's easier for you to carry. Because what he's doing here, he's using thicker materials so that he can contour all of those materials and give you that rounded shape, which gives you a nice, comfortable feeling in the hand. If you want something that feels a bit thicker in the hand, stick with the liner lock. If you prefer a nice, slim EDC knife, then you might want to consider the Framelock variation. And they're really going to run relatively the same price, material for material, model to model. You're just choosing which way you want to have your knife set up. I think these are both fantastic. They're just different enough that I'm going to enjoy having both in my collection. You know, sometimes when I get a new version of the same knife, I'll let the older one go because I'll tend to carry the newer, the newer toy a little bit more often. But, you know, this one having the satin blade, this one having the Damasteel, that being a slimmer Framelock, this being a little bit thicker and having the polished carbon fiber, there's definite differences for me to justify having each in my collection. I'm glad you guys tuned in. Thank you for watching. I've got a whole bunch of videos coming up, including, by the way, and I just happen to have it in my pocket right now, a new acquisition that I will be doing a video on very, very soon. Please stay tuned for that, because that little bastard right there is going to blow your mind. But that's it for me here today, folks. Thank you as always for watching, and I will catch you on the next video.